So what do you want to talk about next? Should we talk about the aging? Speaking of Congress, sort of.
Well, it's kind of like the good segue, which is, we talk about the problems that go on in politics right now, and everybody has a short-term memory. They can't remember something that happened 5 seconds ago. So unfortunately, right now, we have to talk about a person that we don't particularly like in politics, and that's Senator Feinstein from California. And she is not having a very happy Hanukkah right now with everybody coming down on her for the fact that she's got.
This is sort of the problem, though.
Yes,
is that she's obviously, and now it's coming up that people have been covering for her for a while.
Oh yeah,
which doesn't surprise me.
No, but that's what. But again, you have this false pretense about it's one person. It's not.
Story.
It's all about whether or not you you've got to you have to understand that it's not just one elected official. It's a commodity. It's a machine. Diane, for example, just sits at the top. So and if you're a senator from California,
I urge people to go and look at the video of her from whenever that was in the past couple of days, where she was posing questions and literally repeated the same exact question verbatim, read it again as if she hadn't even asked it like minutes later.
Right.
And so, the question becomes, and this of course leads into the concept of term limits, which is, an issue where the left generally dislikes me on, because I support it because we have such messed up elections. If we had really legitimate, fair elections, then we wouldn't need term limits.
No.
But we don't. So I look at that as, at this point, that is something that can help solve a problem. But I would like to point out that my friend Bo of the Fifth Column, who is my guru, made a very good point, which is that when you have term limits and people are in their second term, they have accountability to nobody, because
Correct.
they're not going to necessarily have to be reelected, and they could basically scoop all the money on their way out the door. So it could become a revolving door of skank, which, is basically, what it is. But I think that it's like, you wouldn't ever want to say age limits, because you get in trouble. Like, when you can't even question when people need to renew their driver's license.
But again, Feinstein has been in politics for, I think, like 50 years.
And she's pushing 90?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, and again, everybody is different. But when people start to notice that somebody is not all there is an obligation. This is not okay for people that are having cognitive impairment or significant memory issues or whatever it is, that when you are no longer capable of doing your job, you need to nicely resign and recognize that. And the entitlement.
You're asking people who are borderline sociopaths to give up power. That's a problem. And again, I subscribe to term limits, because this is not supposed to be a career. This is supposed to be a term of service. And there's a very big problem, because it's ironic. I was going to take a picture today when I was walking to the train, and I walked to K Street, and it's like, there is no separation. You can be in the public and the private sector, and that crosses over an ungodly amount when it comes to politics.
And they just go in and out. And by the way, on a local level, we have very much of that in Florida. It's a microcosm of it. So for example, the very traditional thing here in Florida is we do actually have term limits in our legislature. So a lot of the people, what they'll do is they'll go to the Florida legislature, they'll serve in the House, and they'll serve in the Senate, then they'll term out of there, they'll come home, they'll go on a city commission, they'll rotate through there. And basically we've been dealing with the same incestuous, basically slime pool of corruption in our area for decades, and they just keep revolving around from state to
Debbie
local.
sits at the top, but she's not the only one. I mean,
it's
an ongoing problem.
It's a real problem.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and what is your next story is about the death penalty case? Yes.
Yeah. So
so this is important to me.
This is a very big issue, because obviously criminal justice reform is something that, Jen campaigned very hard on. And obviously it's very important, especially down here. We've got a lot of problems in the state. Florida's the #1 state in the country for for-profit prisons. And the other issue, of course, is I think Florida is like 2 or 3 in terms of executions. This is not a Florida execution, but Brandon Bernard is somebody who they are trying to get. I know Kim Kardashian was one of she's definitely
that's the reason it's in the news, because we do this all the time and nobody cares.
That's true. But when a celebrity does it, now all of a sudden people care. So this gentleman, committed murder, whatever the circumstances are. The issue here, I think, is really about whether or not the death penalty makes any sense from a economic standpoint.
No, and you know what's interesting? Like, why are we? See, it's weird to me. I knew that in 1988. I remember writing a piece on it for my high school newspaper, the pros and the cons of the death penalty. And I remember then knowing that it wasn't the way to do it.
Well, so people want.
Are we like? So
no, because we're a bloodthirsty culture, and that's part of the.
I could have told you a long time ago. It's infinitely more expensive to kill people than to not. But more importantly, it's just I've always been opposed to it. Like it just does not sit right with me. I've seen it so inequitably applied. It is so discriminatory. It's just not, the system is not working. That's the same thing as how I feel about term limits. If the system worked perfectly, then maybe I wouldn't necessarily have such a.
No, I mean, listen, you wouldn't.
To me, it's still amoral, by the way, but it wouldn't be, you wouldn't necessarily find it so inequitable, but it is.
No.
And it's a problem.
No, and of course, remember, if you did have fair and free elections, if you had a campaign finance system that was even-handed, you wouldn't necessarily need term limits because the person would have to be earning their position. They wouldn't just be able to buy their position.
Well, and if you knew that somebody was having a fair trial and proper representation and there wasn't racial discrimination,
correct,
then that might change how some people feel. I mean, because I do know people that their problem with capital punishment is that it's not equitably applied.
Correct.
That is one of my problems with it. And I just find it amoral. But that is actually one of the things where I know I'm not in with the majority of people. I do recognize that. But in any event, it is so improperly applied that it's just not, it's not good. I want people to understand what I mean when I say like ineffective assistance of counsel. So the Supreme Court case on this found that a lawyer sleeping at the defense table and or intoxicated and passed out did not constitute ineffective assistance of counsel. Yeah. So when you see things like that, you know that this is just it's not equitable. So
no, the system doesn't work. And again, for-profit corrections makes absolutely no sense. And of course, as we know, whether a person is guilty of murder, they can sit on death row for 30 years. If anybody knows what it costs to house somebody on death row, it is such a waste of. But
we know why we like that, though.
Well, again, we have it's a for-profit motive.
It is.
You have attorneys that make a lot of money. It is a cottage industry.
It's bad.
It is. But again, if you take away the for-profit motive out of corrections, you also wouldn't have attorney generals like Kamala Harris making nefarious deals with prisons to employ slave labor.
Well, that's the thing. This is the extension of slavery. I mean, it really is. I mean, our incarceration, our corrections is modern day slavery. There are way too many people incarcerated that ought not be incarcerated for a variety of reasons.
Nonviolent drug
offenders. But I mean, whether it was in a really ineffective assistance of counsel, there are a myriad of reasons, but I bet you it's about a third. I bet you a third of the people that are incarcerated ought not be, or have served ridiculously overlong sentences for things that they shouldn't still be sitting there for.
Well, again, that's another problem with the for-profit system is, you get paid money.
Yeah.
And again, whether it's our Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz or a lot of other people that take ungodly amounts of money from Geo Group, for example, they get paid to put people in prison.
Yeah. And this also, by the way, transfers to immigration detention centers. It's the same thing. So it's the same profit motive. And actually what's even a little bit scarier to me, if you can believe that, about immigration detention centers is that since they're not citizens, it's like we have basically like mini gitmos like all around where people don't get given translators. They don't get fair access to their attorneys. They are there for so much longer than anybody would need to be there. And I'm talking about nonviolent people. These are people that were just improperly here.
Correct.
Like my friend Emily, who got deported to Venezuela, who is like it's so upsetting to me. Like,
and then when you hear
when
you hear about people advocate for Juan Guaido I mean, listen, we don't support Maduro, but you have to have a foreign policy of, unless somebody is literally pointing a a cruise range missile or a nuclear weapon at us.
Yeah. Well, and for me, it also comes down to if there's a genocide.
That is correct.
Ironically, we're assisting the genocide.
Right, because we're putting sanctions on them and strangling them to death.
Well, I was even talking about Yemen. But yeah, we could talk about Venezuela.
Correct.
The kids today, I did this thing today called Pizza and Politics, which I think when it was in person, there probably is pizza.
A lot more, yes.
But this was Pizza and Politics over Zoom. And it's kids. Well, to me, I think at this point, anybody like under 30 is a kid, but it's like kids. And it's just sort of an introduction as to why they should get involved, what they should know, like how to, what to know about the political system and stuff. And they were asking me about Venezuela. And it's just very, people don't know because this is not how it's covered. And actually, the only person who's ever been honest about it is Trump.
We totally went in. We totally went in for the oil. We went in for the oil. You got to give us the oil. We're totally there for the oil. You got to give it to us.
I actually do appreciate that. But yeah, the Venezuela. Yeah. Thank you for telling us that. He said it about Syria too. I appreciate it.
Well, that's part. Well, again, that's the reason they don't want him. And my issues with him as president is all about policy, specifically the environment. But the powers that be did not want him in because he didn't protect the machine the way that you're supposed to. Somebody like Joe Biden, unfortunately, is going to protect the machine because he doesn't really. I mean, at this point, who knows how much is there? There's no there, if you will. But right now, he's still not president yet. He is in the transitional period, but Trump is finding every which way to try to drag this thing out, which is so ridiculous at this point because you've got people. We're literally 2 freaking weeks away from Christmas, and people cannot afford to live. They're going to get kicked out of their homes on New Year's. People do not have another surplus check coming, although we have to give credit where credit's due. Bernie is actually fighting very hard right now, delaying the bill from being passed because he's trying to get the $1,200 stimulus check in there, our second one. Hey, you know what? We beg for our breadcrumbs.
No,
just a smidgen,
pathetic.
just a smidgen, please.
And at this point,
But the truth is, Trump doesn't want to either. He doesn't want to accept it, or he's just trying to get as much money out of his base as he can.
But this whole lawsuit thing that is now really brewing, and it's not really being covered that much.
No.
And I'm not talking about all his little cases that have been dismissed.
Just remember, if this lawsuit goes on, it could actually, I believe, could it delay Biden's inauguration?
I don't know. But now, so basically, if you're watching just regular news, you're hearing that all of his state cases keep getting thrown out because they have been.
Correct.
But in the meantime, 14 states?
No, 17. Or is it 18 now? 18 states
plus
now.
Donald Trump.
Yes.
Are now suing the states. Are they suing all four of the states?
Well, no, my understanding, if anybody in the chat, Ryan Sullivan, you may have some information on this apparently. I believe there is a lawsuit in Texas.
But they're suing one state from another.
Yes. And then there are, I believe what happens is other states can join in on the Texas lawsuit. And what they're trying to do effectively is nullify the results in the 4 swing states that decided the election.
So what we have here, to me, and again, I keep forgetting to bring my little constitution back over here. So this is a problem.
I can grab it.
No, it's right over there. This is a violation of, I'm gonna say, Article 4, and I'm gonna go get it.
Well,
but this is a violation of full faith and credit. This is not constitutional. How can one state sue another state about that state's procedures, which are different from this? That you cannot do that.
Yeah, I thought I had it right, Ryan. 18 states are suing the 4 swing states to nullify the results.
I don't see how this works.
But constitutionally speaking, it is a
yes, it's Article 4. I'm correct.
Okay,
it is Article 4, full faith and credit. I don't see how this works. I don't know of a case where one state has been able to sue another state based on that state's own laws. I don't know of such a thing happening. So it might seem like a massive thing that's going down, and I appreciate that's very dramatic. But I think it's almost for the image. It's like it's almost gimmick-like. I cannot see how this can go anywhere.
Which does make you wonder, what is his end game? I mean, obviously, if the intention is just to prolong this, but again, my attitude is this. There is no question that cheating goes on in elections in this country. You'd have to be completely naive and completely on the blue pill, if you will, if you think that that's not going on. However,
Oh, she says she can still.
If there are,
sure.
Yeah, if there is still, let's put it this way. If there is still the prospect of what do we do going forward and how do we make this change possible? If Trump cared one iota about anybody but himself, let's just be clear about this. He's not talking about any solutions. One of the solutions that we do have, if we want to have more fair and free elections in this country, is move to hand-marked paper ballots. We have to have that. If we don't have hand-marked paper ballots, there is no paper trail. There's no way to verify. I don't want to vote on a voting machine. Who the heck knows what's going to happen? We all know that the voting machines are owned by special interest groups.
Like 2/3 of the voting machines in this country is the same company. And it's just, and here in Florida, by the way, when you do get a recount, they're still just running the ballots through the same machines.
Correct.
They're just doing it again.
And the Diebold voting machines, which are, they were owned by George Soros. Listen, for us, this is not a partisan issue.
No.
It's not supposed to be. No one trusts elections in this country. And frankly, I don't know, the international organization says we have the worst election process in the world. There is nothing worse than what we do here. It is completely dishonest. And again, this also speaks to a larger issue, which is the fact that everyone knows that there was nefarious dealings going on in the 2016 primary, whether you want to put it all on Debbie Wasserman Schultz, you want to put it on the Clintons, whatever you want. But the reality is Bernie was cheated in 2016, and he never spoke up about it to the extent of saying, we have to change the electoral process in this country.
But it's just it really is like almost stale that the matter who wins, it's this cheating. So it's like, okay, so there was cheating when Trump won and the Democrats are upset he's not our proper president. And so now they're set, now the Republicans are not going to be happy with this election. And we're just going back and forth. And then each new president comes in and just undoes what the previous president did. This is sort of like when you pick a new class president every year. And they just, this is how juvenile and petty all this stuff is.
Correct.
Like they literally do things just to spite the person that was there.
And and all the while we do have these very serious problems that they don't want to talk about. This is why most people don't want to get involved in politics, because they don't trust the process. And quite frankly, I don't blame them. Why would you trust the process? What is to say that there aren't major issues that go on? And for those that don't think ballot harvesting goes on, you better believe it goes on. You better believe that they bundle votes, that they have a way to figure out exactly who hasn't voted yet, that they get what they need to get.
We actually found out how they do it. I've now been informed
this
how
goes on everywhere.
Yeah.
And I can only tell you that what it was like for me personally, really getting involved in politics back in 2015, because I've always been involved, but I was never really involved. But when Bernie came along, I really decided to get involved in a very aggressive way. And what I noticed when you would try at any local, Dem club or Democratic office, when it was Bernie versus Hillary, you could not go into any Democratic office and find anything about Bernie Sanders. It was all about Hillary. That is one form of rigging. It may not be at the ballot box, but that is another form of rigging where you're not allowed to have democracy. When Jen ran against Debbie, same deal. You're not allowed to talk about the primary. You could talk about all the other races that are going on around here. That's fine. Debbie, no, no, no.